no joke, after modifying this device, the PS Vita is officially my favorite gaming experience. Not my monster gaming PC, connected to a 4K OLED high refresh rate panel. Not my PlayStation 5, but this tiny device that came out in 2011. I promise there's a reason why I say this. And by the end of this video, I think that you're gonna agree with me. Let's get into it. Before we get into all of this, we have to understand the PS Vita landscape, which is a rabbit hole I did not think I was going to get into a few weeks ago. There are three key models of the PS Vita: the PS Vita 1000, the 2000, which I picked up, and the PS Vita TV, which in my opinion is kind of dumb being a console instead of a handheld, so we won't cover that one. So with that, we were left with the 1000 and 2000 models. Key differences are that the 1000 is a bit larger and has an OLED display, and the 2000 is thinner, lighter, and has an LCD panel. And although it has an LCD panel, which is an older and more dated technology, it uses a lot less power, so the battery life is greatly improved over the 1000 model. And it still looks pretty decent for an LCD, especially on the 5-inch screen. The key other difference is the presence of internal storage on the 2000 model, which is only 1 GB, but that's just enough for what we need to do to get this thing modified. More on that later. So in the end, I decided the clear option for me would be the 2000 model. Given the simplified modification process, which essentially takes these devices from ancient garbage to handhelds that are worthy of being used with the flagships of today. The main marketplace for these devices is eBay these days, since they were discontinued over 5 years ago, with many of them coming straight from Japan, like this one. I was able to get this one for a pretty decent price, higher than you might expect given the age, but a lot of that comes down to the modding community keeping these alive. And it is basically in factory new condition, which I was personally blown away by. The most wild thing to me after using this for a few weeks is that the PS Vita was actually a commercial failure for Sony. With just around 12 million units sold, it came out right before mobile phone games started to really pick up, and only a year or two before the release of the PlayStation 4, which ended up really stealing a lot of the handheld's thunder, as it never really did see widespread consumer adoption. And Sony ended up all but abandoning the device and pretending that it never happened years before the expected life cycle of this device. But this abandonment is actually what makes the PS Vita as good as it is today, which sounds counterintuitive, but it actually makes a ton of sense when you dissect it. You see, once official updates from Sony stopped coming out for this device, the homebrewing and jailbreaking community went wild with it, fully unlocking its true potential, something we never saw from Sony directly or any of their developers. With this, we got the ability to greatly expand the storage of this device, far beyond the painfully small, but yet painfully expensive storage adapters that Sony originally shipped with these. Through the use of these expansion cards that accept micro SD cards. And if you know anything about these, they are literally dirt cheap, which is a huge win for us as consumers. Now we could have our entire library of games installed on this device at the same time, taking the portability of it and our library to the next level. We're also now, through the homebrewing app, you're able to download ports of games that were never available on the device during its life cycle. Take Cuphead, for example. Through a dedicated community, you were able to take the version of the game that you purchased on Steam for your PC and port it over to your Vita. This is, by a mile, my favorite way to play this game. And I've already poured several hours into it, mostly because I'm absolute cheeks at this game. Fuck. Customization of this device is also taken to the next level with the Custom Themes Manager, which gives you access to legit thousands of community-created themes. And by an absolute mile, the coolest part of modding this device is the installation of Adrenaline, which not only enables the use of native PSP games, but literally installs the entire PSP OS on the device, making this essentially 2 handhelds in one now. It really blows my mind just how well PSP games run on this device, and it honestly feels like you're playing them on the original PSP. And given that I never owned a PSP either, it is so cool to have access to that entire library for the first time, and more of the Grand Theft Auto games that came out on that console that I've never experienced before, like Chinatown Wars. Although this is more of a side-scroller experience, which does not really compare to what we have today, it is still super enjoyable, especially in this form factor. There are also tons of games that have been imported from mobile devices, and even Flash games, with an absolute classic in my book, Age of War. This took me down such a nostalgia trip because I used to play this around like 15 years ago. Much like Cuphead, I've already poured an unacceptable amount of time into these games, given how well they run in this form factor, and to be honest, it feels like they're almost designed to be played this way. But up until this point, we've talked a lot about third-party games and games that were not originally on the device, but what about PS Vita games themselves? For people that don't really care about all of this and just want to enjoy the original PS Vita library, well, this modification greatly improves that experience as well. One of the biggest complaints about the PS Vita has always been frame rates, and it makes sense given how close to the limit many of these games took the hardware inside the PS Vita. Take Borderlands 2 for example, one of my favorite games of all time. It runs like absolute dog natively on the Vita, averaging around 10 to 15 FPS, which is entirely unplayable. With the modded Vita, we can fix that. One of the apps that we could download, PSV Shell, allows us to overclock this device. Here we could push the processor and GPU further than they are from the factory to smooth out the frame rate in some of these games. With Borderlands 2, for example, coming a lot closer to that target and more consistent 30 FPS that it should have been at launch, which I know is still far from incredible by modern standards, but it is far more playable as a result. And even better yet, this is not really an overclock per se, as Sony factory underclocked the CPU and GPU to save on battery life. So all this is really doing is bring the clock speeds back up closer to their advertised standard of what they would actually be capable of natively, which was 800 megahertz on the processor inside this. So from a hardware perspective, there are some concerns online, but it's relatively safe to overclock this device for standard use. All in all, I'm really amazed by this device. With how easy it was to mod straight from the built-in browser, making it so widely accessible to anyone who has one of these laying around or is considering picking one up. And if you have one of these already, you're going to be amazed by just how capable this device can be and how much better it is than you remember. I hope you all liked this video. If you did, please do like and subscribe. It helps me out a ton, and it will allow you to stay up to date on all the other videos that I plan on making for this device. I'll see you.